In this video, we will see how TBox can act as a router and a gateway, illustrated by three cases. The first one is Modbus Routing. Imagine that you have a site where you have several TBox on the site. You will have a local network running TBoxes, and you will have one TBox with a GSM. The Modbus Routing allows accessing the TBoxes on the local network through the GSM. On this way, you just need one TBox with a GSM, all the others can be accessed through this GSM. The second case is an IP routing using virtual server and IP forwarding. The example we will use is a camera declared into an HTML page. To access the HTML page, a browser used the port 80. But the camera also used the port 80. So to make distinction between what goes to the camera and what goes to the HTML port, we will use another port for the camera that we will redirect to the camera. So this is using virtual server and IP forwarding. Third example, NAT or network address translation. Imagine again our site with local devices. If we want those local devices to take advantage of the GSM, for instance to send email, we will use the network address translation mechanism. Let's now see this in TwinSoft. Back to our program. So the Modbus Routing associates two communication ports, an incoming port and an outgoing port. So if I go back into my PDF for the Modbus Routing, so the incoming port is the GSM, and I have an LT2 connected to the RS232 port. This will be my outgoing port. So I have to associate those two ports. For this, I have to know the index of the port. So if I go into my list of IOs, I see that the GSM is the port number 8. COM8 is the GSM. The RS232 on which my LT2 will be connected is the port COM1. So I have to associate COM8 and COM1. And this I can do it using a system analog variable number 31, which is called reroute, and it's a mask variable. It's a 16 bits variable that I have illustrated here, for which each bit corresponds to a communication port, starting at the least significant bit for COM1. So if I have to associate COM1 and COM8, I do COM1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So to the bits 1 and 8, I set them to 1. It makes in decimal 129, so I have to write 129 into this variable. But I want this reroute to be permanent. So I will just tag this variable. I double click, I tag it, I will leave its name, and I will initialize it in, let's say, my water program. So if I go to main, I have my water program, which is the basic program. I will just make if trigger pause. So remember, to initialize, we can use the system variable program run, which changes to 1 at the program startup. So at the program startup, then if trigger pause program run, then reroute equal 129. That's it. When you put everything on one line, you don't have to put endif. If you put on another line like this, then you have to put endif. Okay? So we can keep it this way if we want. That's it. Now let's send to TBox and try this. Let's first take a look to our topology to understand the Modbus routing mechanism. The Modbus routing is based on Modbus station address. When routing has been activated like here, when the TBox MS will receive request, everything which is not for station 1, which is itself, it will be routed to the associated port, so RS232 in this case. I have developed an LT2 application which with station 2. So if I connect to the TBox MS through the GSM with an application for station 2, data will be automatically routed to the RS232 port. Now let's take a look to our camera here. So I have my RS232 port, which is cabled to the RS232 of the LT2, and I have my GSM, which is online. So let's first open our TwinSoft application. Let's check that reroute has been activated. It is indeed. It has been initialized to 129. And let's connect to the GSM. So the IP of the GSM is this one. So I will change the IP TwinSoft has to connect to. In communication PC setup, I type 81.169.87.202. OK. Now, my TwinSoft is connected to the GSM. We can see the activity on the GSM. If I now open the application of the LT2, data will be routed through the RS232, and we will see activity on those LEDs here on the RS232. So I open my LT2 application, okay, and you see TBox is now identifying, and we can see activity. TBox is now identified, and we can see data coming from the LT2. If I do an identification now, I will see that I am connected to the LT2. It's a little bit longer because data has to go through the GSM to RS232 and back. Here I am effectively connected to the LT2. Once I'm connected to the LT2, I can change value. The set point I can make a 12.36, and I can even send the program if I want. So I will send the program, and I will leave the camera so that we can see the activity until the end, and we can see the restart of the LT2. So now data is transferred to the LT2. LT2 is still running here, as we can see here. And at the end, program will be installed in the LT2, and the LT2 will restart, and we will see the restart LED activity on the LT2. Okay, you see here, it's installing the new program. And it is restarting, almost. Done. It has restarted here, and it requires a little bit of time that TwinSoft detected, and that's it. Okay, so I have reprogrammed a local TBox through Modbus routing. That's it for Modbus routing. So let's take a look now to IP forwarding. Activating IP forwarding consists in creating routes between IP interface. So in this case, between the GSM and the LAN, where the camera is connected. So this can be dangerous because you connect together virtually different networks. So for this reason, we have implemented a dedicated login for creating and for activating the IP forwarding NAT and virtual server, what we call the advanced IP settings. So in TwinSoft, first let's activate this advanced IP configuration. For this, we use a code mechanism which is available from a tool called the password generator. So this tool will generate us login. The login is based on a code, okay, and this code is 4 hexadecimal characters. for instance, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the code that you will type here also. So I type 1, 2, 3, 4 and confirm 1, 2, 3, 4. So I go back to my password generator and I will create a login, and the user will be, for instance, John, access level 3 as engineer, and I will get a password. So I have to remember this password. So my user and password to update advanced IP configuration is John C044. So I note this down to remember it. Okay, close this. So now that I have my login, I can go into the advanced, and in the advanced, in the tab TCP/IP, I see those options which were not available before, and I will activate IP forwarding and a virtual server. This is what I need to access the camera on the LAN. I click OK, and when I click OK, I am prompted to log in. So I will log with the user and password I've just created, which was John C044. Once I have done this, I can access in the IP parameters a folder virtual server in which I can create virtual server rules, which will create a route based on a TCP port. And what is this configuration? So any request with the port 8080, I will redirect it to the IP of the camera port 80. So I do that. So the incoming port, you can filter on TCP or UDP. So HTTP to access the camera is TCP. TCP port 8080 will be redirected to 192.168.1.254. Port 80, and I name it camera. Okay, now it means that if I come from outside with a browser, I type the IP address of TBox and I type the port 8080, it will be redirected automatically to the camera. Good. Now, remember that we have activated the firewall to filter all incoming IP communication. So this port, I have to add it into my firewall configuration. So I go into IP security, firewall, input, and I will add an exception that I should allow custom TCP port 8080 from port COM8, and let's say COM3 also. So this will allow only the port 8080 in addition to the others coming from COM8. Now you see that now that I have activated the IP forwarding, in the firewall configuration I have a new folder available which is forward, because this is also protected. So we protected the incoming, so the firewall protect incoming connection, but we also protect the forward. So we will define what can be forwarded. And this is done through the exception in the folder forward. So in the folder forward, I will add an exception. It's forward from COM8 to COM3. And here I select the port which is used to access the camera directly. Okay, so in the input, I allow the 8080, and in the forward, I allow the port after conversion. And I click OK. Let's send this to TBox and see how we can access the camera. Just note that I have changed my connection to TBox. Now I am connected through the USB because the Ethernet will be used to cable the camera directly to TBox. Here is my IP camera with its Ethernet connection, which is cabled to COM3 of the CPU, and I will access it through the IP of the GSM. So let's open a browser, and from the browser let's type the IP address I have received here from the GSM, which is 37.184.28.56. So when you type an IP address of TBox without mentioning anything, the browser will automatically connect to the index page. Now, it's not this that I want to access. I want to access the camera. But to access the camera, I have to use another port. To use another port, you just put column, the number of the port. Yeah, you have to put in front HTTP to indicate that you still have to do HTTP, but with another port. And remember the URL to access the image in my camera. It was image.jpg. And now I am connected through the TBox to the camera. Now I have some issues because this IP address is a dynamic IP address. So it's difficult to declare this address dynamically. So to resolve dynamic IP address, we can use the DIN-DNS service. So that's the opportunity to show you another service that TBox supports, which is DIN-DNS. You see from here, I have the folder DIN-DNS, and I can add a DIN-DNS server. So how does this work? So the DIN-DNS server is somewhere on internet, and this server will route a request from a client to the TBox. So you will access it using a name, which is fixed, and this will be converted to an IP address, which is dynamic. First, you have to subscribe an account to DIN-DNS service. I have done to a service called NoIP, but you can use, there are several DIN-DNS services you can use. So after I have subscribed an account, I receive a name. So this is the name that I will use to access the TBox. I will declare my account into TBox so that when the TBox receives a new IP, it will refresh the DIN-DNS server with a new IP. And when, as a client, you connect to the DIN-DNS server, it will route automatically to the new IP address of TBox. So let's do this. So I give a name, I say no IP. The URL of no IP is not this one, it's different because I use no IP. So the server for no IP is here, is din-update-noip.com. So I just copy this one and I will put it into the server IP address. The URL is the name that I have received when I have subscribed my account, and the name is tboxjean2.dindns.net. Then you have to log in. My login is my email address, jean.burton@ovaro.com, and a password. Once I have declared my DIN-DNS account, I have to associate this account to an IP interface. So to indicate which interface has to refresh the DIN-DNS server. So in my case, it's the GSM. So when the GSM changes its IP address, it has to refresh the DIN-DNS server. So I go into my GSM settings. In the tab TCP, I have a tab Advanced, and there I can select a DIN-DNS server. I have only one, so I keep this one. So each time the GSM will receive a new IP, each time the GSM receives a new IP, it will refresh the DIN-DNS server. Let's send this to TBox and see the result in the browser. GSM is connected. It has received another IP address, but I don't care because now I will not use IP address anymore. I will use name. So the name is, remember, it's TBox Jean. Here it is. So when I connect using the name, it does exactly the same as when I use the IP address. It's converted into the DNS server. If I want to access the image of the camera, I put column 8080 image.jpg http, that's it. And exactly the same as before, but now using a DNS service. So this URL is the one I will insert in the object in my web form to display the camera. So let's open one web form. So I will take the water web form. Take some time to open. So I have an object camera. So let's just put it here somewhere on the middle. Okay, it doesn't matter. It's just to show you. So the property of the camera is URL, and I will just copy paste the URL I have here. Copy, paste. Let's just check. So HTTP, TBox Jean 2, DNS, exactly. Now this object has a property which is the refresh rate, and let's refresh it each, let's say 5 seconds. But thanks to the data throughput, the faster it refreshes, the more data it will consume. So let's send this. I am connected to TBox using the name. So let's log in to be able to display our water page. Log in. I can access the water page, and in the water page I have a new object which is the camera. So you see, well, if I put my hand, we will see after a few seconds it will appear at the refresh rate. I can remove the USB cable because it's not used anymore. So here is the USB cable that I have removed. No USB cable anymore. Okay, so that's it for the virtual server and IP forwarding. Now, last topic for this video is the network address translation, which allows to use TBox as a modem gateway. So in this example, I have my LT2 here that will send mail through the GSM of the TBox MS. For this, there is a key settings of the LT2 is that the gateway settings of the LT2 must be the Ethernet of the CPU32, so that all the requests that needs to go out will use this port to go out. Let's take a look into TwinSoft how we configure this. First thing to do is to update our advanced TCP/IP settings and to allow the NAT. So remember, we have advanced RTU TCP/IP, advanced TCP/IP setting here, and I will activate address translation. Remember that updating any configuration here is protected with the login, so I have to log, and remember my log was John CO44. Okay. Now I will have to update the firewall rules because the TBox LT2 will send data through the TBox. So TBox will receive incoming IP communication that I have to allow. Let's take a look to our topology. So I have added some information here. So the LT2 will use the SMTP of Gmail, which is a name. So this name will have to be resolved by a DNS connection which use the UDP port 53. Then it will have to send the mail through SSL, so the SMTPS use the TCP port 587. Those ports must be enabled as input exception in the firewall, and we have also to allow them as forward from COM3 to COM8. So let's do that in TwinSoft. So I go into my IP parameters, no, security, firewall, input. So first add an exception, which is custom UDP 53 on COM3 and custom TCP 587 also on COM3, and then the forward COM3 to COM8 from the service custom UDP 53, and the same for COM3 to COM8 for SMTPS custom TCP, in this case 587. So UDP 53, TCP 587, and the same here with my input. So now we are ready. We can send this to TBox and test the sending of email from LT2 through TBox MS. So here are my connections. So at the moment my PC is connected to the LT2. So this TwinSoft here communicates to the LT2 because I will send an email from the LT2. So I don't have any connection at the moment on the MS32. This connection that you see here with the red cable, it goes to the LT2. So this will allow the LT2 to send information through the COM3 of the MS CPU32, and it will be forwarded to the GSM. I can see now that my GSM is online. In the LT2 I have defined some tags, I have defined some sampling tables, and I have defined a report, and this report includes some online data and some historical data. This is the report that I will send through the MS. Now if you look into the LEDs, you will see the transmit receive LED of the GSM which are activated when the TBox is in alarm, and we will see that LT2 is in alarm because its green LED will turn red. So let's do this. So I will activate the alarm, F4, 1. So you can see the TBox is in alarm, and you can see activity on the GSM, and when the email is fully sent, we can see the alarm has been the alarm has been acknowledged, and the TBox returned to green. By the way, we can take a look to the trace log of the LT2 to check the sending of email. So retrieve trace log. Yes, we will no filtering. So if we go to the start, we can see first the DNS connection. So TBox LT2 is connected to the DNS server of Google to resolve the name smtp@gmail.com. So it got the IP address of the server. It exchanged certificate with Gmail, and it sends data, and at the end the operation is completed. And this is the mail that I have received. So the report with the alarms. There had been already one alarm acknowledged, and some sampling table, data of sampling table. So here we are with this video with routers and gateway functionality. Let's now take a look to the questionnaire. For this video, if you have another TBox, you can test the Modbus routing. So you cable this second TBox to MS32S2. The easiest is to use RS485 cabling. You tag the system variable reroute and you initialize it according to the in-out port that you use. By the way, in the document coming with the videos, you have a table with all the ports and the availability routing. Then you send this program to the MS CPU32S2, and in PC setup you force the IP address to communicate with this TBox to make sure that when you open the routed application it will use this IP address. Then you open the routed application and you check that it communicates properly. Then in the tab Protection you enable Advanced TCP/IP Settings and you type as code 1234. In the Advanced RTU Properties you activate Virtual Server and IP Forwarding. Then you will need a login to accept this changing. So you open Password Generator and you create a login with global code 1234, the name test, the level 3, and note the password you receive. You send us this password and you send us the application. Good luck!